But we begin tonight with major developments in the many criminal cases against Donald Trump. Earlier today, Florida Judge Aileen Cannon ruled that the trial in the classified documents case will begin on May 20th, 2024, in between the December start date that the Justice Department asked for and a post-election date, which Trump's lawyers wanted. But even though Cannon didn't immediately cave to Trump's request, her time frame could still prove complicated, given the political calendar. On May 20th, all but 6 states will have had their primary elections, meaning we will probably already know who the Republican nominee for president is. And if that nominee is Trump, which is very likely, then having a May trial will no doubt lead to cries of election interference and calls for further delays. But even as the twice impeached, twice indicted former president is clearly counting on that friendly judge and the friendly Florida district to help him avoid conviction, he's not exactly out of the woods, especially as another indictment from Jack Smith's office could come at any moment. This one relating to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And today we're learning new details about what exactly the special counsel wanted to know from William Russell, Trump's personal aide, who testified before the grand jury yesterday. NBC News has learned that prosecutors questioned Russell about Trump's state of mind during and after the 2020 election period, which Russell probably knows a thing or two about. A source tells NBC that he would often informally engage in conversations with Trump and other key staff, including Mark Meadows in the West Wing and in the Oval Office. Not to mention, he was with Trump for much of the day on January 6th. You can see him here with the former president at the Ellipse. And while Russell has previously testified before the grand jury, notably, he never testified before the House Select January 6th committee, meaning he could potentially have key information about Trump's thinking on and leading up to that day that we have not yet heard. Meanwhile, there's breaking news tonight. The Washington Post is reporting that the special counsel also reached out to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp for information about Trump's efforts to overturn the election results in that state. The governor's office confirmed the special counsel's contact, but would not comment any further. Joining me now is Congressman Eric Swalwell of California and Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor, MSNBC legal analyst, and host of the Justice Matters podcast. I will ask the congressman, with my apologies, to defer to the lawyer in just this case. I know you're a lawyer, too. But I do want to ask Glenn a question before I get to you, Congressman, if you don't mind, because I want to go back to the Aileen Cannon. Thank you, sir. I want to go back to the Aileen Cannon of it. This date, Glenn, that she has set in May, seems to me like an alley-oop in favor of Trump, and this is why. In May, it will probably be known whether he's the nominee. And if he's the nominee, you can bet he's going to go back to Aileen Cannon and say, this prosecution can't continue. I'm the nominee. This is the current administration attempting to weaponize the government against their opponent. Is that how you see it? This looks like a first step to doing what Trump asked. What do you see? How do you see it?
Of course, Donald Trump and his team of lawyers will make that ask of Judge Cannon. You're absolutely right, Joy. But if Judge Cannon can sit fair, impartially, and independently, and she is an honest broker of the law, here's what she should say. I set this trial date 10 months in advance to give you all enough time to do what you needed to do to prepare to defend Donald Trump at trial. Guess what? I already knew there was going to be a presidential election in November 2024 when I set a May 2024 trial date. Folks were going to trial. Here's what I'll say, Joy. When federal judges set trial dates, particularly so far in advance, I mean, nearly a year, for goodness sake, they expect that to be a firm trial date. The flip side of that coin is, we all know, the congressman knows from being a prosecutor, I know, trial dates get pushed. This one shouldn't get pushed for 100 reasons. Let's hope Judge Cannon is an honest broker of the law and she forces folks to go to trial in May.
Can we just put up the 3 dates that were just up on the screen just a moment ago? I don't want to put them back up for the congressman because you know the folks on the other side who sit on something called the Weaponization Committee and on all these other committees where they're really just, as you've said, they are the legal firm for Donald Trump. You're going to have in May, on May 20th, this classified documents trial hopefully begin without delay. But then you go to July and we're at the Republican National Convention. Then you have a presidential election in November. It seems to me that there is zero chance that Republicans will not attempt to use that calendar, Congressman, to try to claim that this whole prosecution should go away. And I don't see how they don't do it. And how do you think that winds up playing out?
Well, as we've seen in the first 7 months of Speaker McCarthy's leadership, his entire agenda is about protecting Donald Trump, and that'll continue into next year. It's not about lowering the cost of health care or reducing gun violence in our community or making college more affordable. It's entirely about protecting Donald Trump, and that'll be put into high gear next year. But I want to make a point. Jack Smith can't make this prosecutor, and Glenn knows why, but we can make this point, which is if Donald Trump was so innocent and this prosecution was so rigged, wouldn't an innocent person subjected to a rigged prosecution crawl through glass and walk over fire to exercise their speedy trial right? Someone who is as innocent as Donald Trump claims he is would not want to delay justice. The whole point of a speedy trial right, which he could use and go to trial pretty quickly, is to protect people who are wrongfully accused. And so he's sure acting like a guilty person.
You know, it's a really good point, Glenn, except that he then would have to claim that he's equally innocent in like half a dozen cases. He's got the case in New York. Let's just do that calendar. Here's another calendar for you. October 2nd, 2023, you've got the AG civil fraud trial. January 15, 2024, the E. Jean Carroll civil trial, in which he defamed her again, allegedly. January 29, 2024, federal class action lawsuit trial. And this is the New York case, another New York case. The New York hush money trial is going to take place March 25th, and then May 20th, you have this trial. They all can't be speedy trials. They all can't take place at the same time. How does this wind up getting sequenced, do you think?
Yeah, his prosecution dance card couldn't be fuller. And I think there will have to be some at least communication, maybe not coordination or cooperation among the various jurisdictions, but at least some communication. They're going to need to prioritize these trials. Now, Joy, let me tell you, I was a federal prosecutor for 30 years, and the prevailing wisdom is the feds will ordinarily try to go to trial first. Now, that is no disrespect intended to state prosecutors, district attorneys. But I think everybody recognizes that the federal government has more resources. The federal government has an unrivaled conviction rate. I can argue both sides of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they do because they only take the strongest cases to trial. I have a feeling the district attorneys might be happy to lay back and let the feds go first. I've always maintained that even though Donald Trump committed lots of state crimes and lots of federal crimes, he's a federal problem. And a federal problem can only be solved with a federal prosecution, though I am thrilled that Fani Willis is in the game and that D.A. Bragg is in the game. They're vindicating important rights of the citizens in their jurisdictions. But there's going to have to be some communication to prioritize Donald Trump's criminal trials.
Does that apply also? I mean, now that we know that the special counsel, Glenn, is speaking to Brian Kemp or has spoken with Brian Kemp, what does that indicate? Because we still don't know a date for a prosecutorial decision from Fani Willis.
Yeah, it just shows that Jack Smith is casting the widest possible investigative net. He's got to look at what Trump and Lindsey Graham and Mark Meadows and others did down in Georgia, just as he has to look to the other battleground states where there were fake electors, where there was Donald Trump calling governors and pressuring them. So this is Jack Smith continuing to saw the investigative wood in front of him.
Let me play a piece of sound for you. This is Steve Bannon and Roger Stone talking about what Donald Trump was going to do before the election even happened.
And what Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner.
I really do suspect it'll still be up in the air. But when that happens, the key thing to do is to claim victory. Possession is 9/10 of the law. No, we won. You. Sorry, over. We won. Yeah. You're wrong. You.
Giving away the game, Congressman, we now know, based on Rolling Stone's reporting, that this Trump war room, we've heard a lot about it, the Willard Hotel, was a subject of particular interest for the January 6th committee's investigation for its role as the hub of the Trump campaign's attempts to block the counting of electoral votes on January 6th. Top Trump advisors used the so-called command center while pressuring Vice President Pence to reject the counting of legitimate electors and encourage state legislatures to instead send the fake electors in. This is Rolling Stone's reported, not independently confirmed by NBC. However, we do know who was in that room, Congressman. Steve Bannon, Mike Flynn, Roger Stone, Bernard Kerik, Boris Epshteyn, Rudy Giuliani, and John Eastman. And we know that some of them were using Oath Keepers, et cetera, as security. What do you make of this war room piece of the investigation?
This ain't my parents' Republican Party. I was raised by two Republicans who told me about the values of Ronald Reagan. I didn't agree with them, obviously, but they were rooted in principles. And when you listen, to Bannon and Stone, it's a party of violence. It's a party of chaos. It's a party of grievances. And it's a party that's trying to win through subtraction by taking away your rights, by taking away your freedom, and taking away your votes. And that is what they're going to run the same playbook in 2024. But Joy, your viewers should rest assured that the people who support that number is shrinking. And that since Donald Trump was elected in 2016, we won in 18, 20, beat expectations in 22, won the Wisconsin Supreme Court just recently, won in Jacksonville, Florida. We're on a winning streak because people want competence and community over chaos. And so I'm confident we're in the right direction, and they're going to be in the dustbins of history.